The scream tore through the village like thunder rolling across the jungle, stopping every conversation mid-sentence. One moment, the afternoon market buzzed with laughter and the smell of wood smoke drifting between small huts. The next, everyone turned toward the narrow dirt path where a woman stood pointing furiously at me, her voice shaking with outrage. "Call the police," she shouted. "He's dangerous." The words cut through the air so sharply that even the birds scattered from the nearby trees. I froze, confused. Just seconds earlier, I had been helping a local boy pick up spilled baskets after a sudden bump near the crowded stall. The child was fine, smiling even, but now his mother, eyes wide, face burning with anger, was painting a completely different story. Villagers gathered quickly, whispering in low voices. Some looked concerned, others simply watched, waiting to see what would happen next. In a place where everyone knew each other, public accusations carried heavy weight. The woman kept speaking louder, filling the silence with dramatic claims. She said I pushed her child, that I caused chaos, that I was disrespectful to the community. Every new sentence sounded bigger than the one before. I tried to explain, but she raised her voice higher, drowning mine out completely. My heart pounded as I noticed people pulling out phones, recording the scene. The heat of the jungle suddenly felt heavier, pressing down on my shoulders. Then someone whispered the words that changed everything: "Police are coming." The village fell into an uneasy quiet. In a remote area like this, police rarely appeared unless something serious happened. Kids were pulled closer to their parents. The market vendors watched carefully from behind their wooden stands. I looked toward the boy at the center of the accusation. He stood quietly, holding the basket I had helped him pick up, seeming more confused than afraid. Soon the distant sound of an engine broke through the jungle noise. A dusty police vehicle appeared along the dirt road, slowly rolling into the village square. Two officers stepped out, calm but observant, scanning faces and body language before saying a word. The woman rushed toward them instantly, speaking rapidly, gesturing wildly in my direction. I could see confidence in her stance, as if she believed this would be over within minutes. One officer walked toward me while the other listened to her version of the story. His expression was neutral, professional. "Tell me what happened," he said quietly. Before I could answer, the little boy suddenly tugged on his mother's arm, and whispered something that made the officer pause and turn back toward him. That tiny moment shifted the entire atmosphere. The crowd leaned closer. The jungle felt silent again. And I realized the truth was about to come out in a way no one expected. The jungle air felt heavier as the officers began asking questions. The market that had been buzzing moments earlier grew strangely quiet, as if the entire village was holding its breath. The woman continued speaking quickly, pointing toward me again and again, insisting I had caused trouble. Her voice echoed off the wooden huts, dramatic and confident, but the officers didn't rush to conclusions. They listened carefully, their expressions calm and unreadable. The officer standing near me nodded slowly. "Start from the beginning," he said. His tone wasn't accusing, just steady. I explained how the boy had bumped into a crowded fruit stand, baskets had fallen, and I simply helped him pick things up before anyone got hurt. As I spoke, the boy looked at me, then at the ground, almost nervous. I could feel dozens of eyes watching every movement, every reaction. Around us, villagers whispered softly. Some nodded, as if they had seen what happened. Others looked unsure, hesitant to speak. In small communities, people often avoid getting involved in conflicts, especially when emotions run high. Still, the tension shifted slightly as the officers started asking the same questions to people nearby. An older shopkeeper stepped forward first. "I saw him helping the boy," he said firmly. Another woman agreed, saying there was no shouting or pushing, only a brief accident. Each new voice chipped away at the dramatic version of events. The woman's expression tightened. She interrupted repeatedly, trying to correct people, but the officers calmly asked her to let everyone speak. Then the little boy surprised everyone. The officer crouched to his level and asked gently, "Are you okay? Can you tell me what happened?" The child hesitated, glancing at his mother before speaking quietly. "He helped me," he said, barely above a whisper. The crowd fell silent. The truth hung in the air like a sudden change in weather. The woman's confidence cracked for just a second. She tried to explain that she had only acted to protect her child, but now her words sounded uncertain. The officers exchanged a quick glance, the kind that said they understood more than they needed to say aloud. The narrative she had built was beginning to fall apart, piece by piece, right in front of everyone. Meanwhile, I felt my heartbeat finally slowing. I wasn't angry, just relieved that honesty was finding its way to the surface. The villagers watched carefully, their expressions changing from suspicion to curiosity, and finally to quiet understanding. One officer stood up and addressed the crowd calmly, reminding everyone to stay respectful while they finished their questions. The mood softened. Some children resumed playing nearby, sensing the danger had passed. But the biggest turning point hadn't happened yet. As the officers finished speaking with witnesses, one of them walked toward the woman with a serious look. Whatever he said next made her face go pale, and the entire village realized the situation was about to take a shocking turn she never expected. The village square felt frozen as the officer spoke to the woman. His tone remained calm, but the seriousness in his voice was impossible to ignore. She crossed her arms defensively, nodding at first, then shaking her head as if refusing to accept what she was hearing. Around us, the villagers leaned closer, curiosity replacing the earlier tension. Even the jungle sounds seemed quieter, as though nature itself was waiting to see how this would unfold. The second officer walked back toward me, glancing briefly at the little boy. "You've been calm through all this," he said quietly, almost as if reassuring me. I nodded, still trying to process how quickly the situation had escalated from a simple accident to a public accusation. My hands were steady now, but my mind replayed every moment, wondering how easily misunderstandings could spiral when fear took control. Nearby, the woman's voice rose again. "I was only protecting my child," she insisted. The officer listened, but his expression didn't change. He asked her to explain why her story didn't match the witness statements. She hesitated, searching for words. The pause was small, but everyone noticed. In a place where honesty mattered deeply, silence sometimes spoke louder than speech. Then something unexpected happened. The little boy stepped away from his mother and walked closer to the officers. The crowd parted instinctively to let him through. He looked nervous but determined, clutching the edge of his shirt. The officer knelt again, giving him time to speak. "He helped me pick up the baskets," the child said clearly this time, louder than before. "I dropped them by mistake." A wave of whispers moved through the crowd. The woman's shoulders dropped slightly. Her anger seemed to fade into embarrassment. She opened her mouth to say something, then stopped. The officers stood up, exchanging another glance, a quiet confirmation that the truth had become impossible to deny. The people watching no longer looked confused. Many now appeared sympathetic toward me and supportive of the child's honesty. The officer addressed the crowd gently, thanking everyone for staying calm and speaking truthfully. He explained that misunderstandings happen, but accusations can cause real harm when made too quickly. The words were polite, yet everyone understood their meaning. The woman avoided eye contact, staring at the ground while the reality of the situation settled around her. I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. Relief because the truth was finally clear. Sadness because a simple act of helping had turned into something so public and stressful. Still, watching the boy stand bravely and tell the truth reminded me that courage doesn't always come from adults. Just when it seemed everything might quietly end, the officer turned toward the woman again, and asked a question that made the entire village fall silent. Her answer would change the direction of the day completely, and what followed next would leave everyone speechless. The officer's question hung in the air like a heavy pause before a storm. No one spoke. Even the murmurs of the market faded as everyone leaned in, waiting for the woman's response. She stared at the ground for a moment, her confident posture from earlier completely gone. The jungle breeze rustled through the trees, carrying a silence that felt louder than any shouting. "Did you actually see him push your child?" the officer asked again, gently but firmly. The woman hesitated. Her eyes moved toward her son, then toward the crowd surrounding the village square. For the first time, she looked uncertain. I thought he did," she said slowly. The words were quiet, almost swallowed by the air. A low murmur swept through the villagers. The officer nodded, but his expression remained serious. "Thinking is different from knowing," he replied calmly. Those words landed heavily. The woman's shoulders lowered as realization settled in. She tried to explain that she had panicked when she saw the baskets fall and her child crying. She assumed the worst. Fear took over, and before she understood the situation, she had already called the police. The officer listened patiently, allowing her to finish without interruption. The crowd's energy shifted again, no longer tense but reflective. People exchanged thoughtful looks. In small villages, reputation mattered, and everyone understood how quickly a misunderstanding could spread. The boy stood quietly nearby, watching his mother with wide eyes, unsure of how to feel. The officer turned toward him and smiled kindly. "You were brave for telling the truth," he said. The child nodded shyly, gripping the hem of his shirt. I felt a warmth in my chest seeing him recognized for his honesty. Moments earlier, he had been caught between fear and pressure. Now he stood confidently, supported by the truth. Then the officers addressed the crowd, reminding everyone how important it was to ask questions before judging others. Their voices were calm, almost instructional, turning the tense situation into a community lesson. Some villagers nodded in agreement, while others looked down, reflecting on how quickly they had believed the accusation. The woman wiped her face, clearly embarrassed. She glanced toward me, but words seemed stuck in her throat. It was obvious she hadn't expected this outcome. Instead of standing victorious, she now faced the weight of her assumptions in front of the entire village. One officer stepped toward me and said something quietly. "You handled this with patience." That made all the difference. I nodded, grateful but still slightly shaken from the experience. Just as it seemed everything was finally calming down, the woman took a deep breath and stepped forward again. The crowd grew silent. Even the children stopped moving. Everyone sensed something important was about to happen, something that could either heal the moment or make it worse. And when she finally opened her mouth, her words stunned every single person standing there. The village square fell completely silent as the woman stepped forward. Her hands trembled slightly, and the confidence that once fueled her accusations was gone. She looked at the officers first, then at the crowd, and finally at me. The moment stretched longer than expected, heavy with anticipation. Even the children stopped whispering, sensing that something important was about to be said. "I was wrong," she said quietly. The words sounded almost fragile, yet they carried across the square with surprising weight. A ripple moved through the crowd. Not shock exactly, but a collective pause as people absorbed what they had just heard. Public apologies were rare here. Pride usually stood in the way. But now, standing in front of everyone, she seemed smaller, more human. She turned toward her son, her expression softening. "I thought I was protecting you," she whispered, brushing his hair back gently. The boy nodded, still unsure how to react. Then she faced me again. "I shouldn't have accused you without knowing what happened. I let fear speak for me." Her voice cracked slightly at the end of the sentence. I could see the officers watching carefully, making sure the situation stayed calm. One of them gave a small approving nod, almost encouraging the honesty unfolding in front of us. The tension that had gripped the village all afternoon began to dissolve like mist under sunlight. The crowd's reaction surprised me. Instead of mocking or judging her, many villagers looked relieved. Some nodded quietly, appreciating the courage it took to admit a mistake publicly. A shopkeeper clapped softly, and soon a few others joined. Not loud applause, but gentle acknowledgement that the moment mattered. I took a breath before responding. "Thank you for saying that," I said. "We all want children to be safe." My words were simple, but they seemed to ease something in her expression. The little boy stepped closer to me and whispered, "Sorry." I smiled and shook my head. "You did nothing wrong." For the first time since the chaos began, the atmosphere felt peaceful again. The officers relaxed, speaking briefly with each other. One turned to the crowd and reminded everyone that misunderstandings happen, but listening and patience are what keep communities strong. The villagers nodded, the lesson settling deeply into the moment. Just as people started returning to their stalls and conversations, the woman surprised everyone again. She asked if her son could thank me properly, and what happened next became the most emotional part of the entire day. The child stepped forward holding a small woven bracelet from one of the market stands. He offered it to me shyly, saying, "For helping me." The gesture was simple, but it struck straight to the heart. The crowd smiled. Some even wiped their eyes. As the sun began to dip behind the jungle trees, it felt like the story had finally reached its ending. But on the walk home, something happened that made me realize the real lesson of the day had just begun. The walk home felt different from the chaos of earlier. The jungle path glowed with soft evening light, and the sounds of birds slowly replaced the noise of the crowd we had just left behind. The woven bracelet the boy gave me rested in my palm, light but meaningful, a quiet reminder of how quickly fear could turn into understanding. I kept replaying the day in my mind. The shouting, the accusations, the silence, and finally the apology that no one expected. Halfway down the path, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned to see the little boy running toward me again, slightly out of breath. His mother followed at a slower pace, her expression calm now, almost peaceful. The boy looked up and said, "Thank you for helping me, even when everyone was angry." His words were simple, but they carried more honesty than anything I had heard all day. I knelt so we were eye level. "You were brave today," I told him. "Telling the truth isn't always easy." He smiled shyly and ran back to his mother. She offered a quiet nod. Not just an apology, but acknowledgement. No more drama, no more tension, just understanding. As they walked away, I realized something important. The real turning point hadn't been the police arriving or the crowd speaking up. It had been the moment people slowed down long enough to listen. In a village surrounded by dense jungle, where stories travel faster than facts, patience had become the strongest voice. When I reached home, I sat outside for a while, watching the evening settle over the trees. I thought about how easily things could have ended differently. One accusation, one misunderstanding, and someone's reputation could have been damaged forever. Yet truth had a way of finding light when people chose calm over anger. The next morning, the village felt normal again. Children ran through the paths, vendors reopened their stalls, and life moved forward as if nothing had happened. But I noticed something subtle. People greeted me with warmer smiles than before. The story had spread, but now it carried a lesson rather than conflict. Later that day, I saw the little boy again, laughing with friends near the market. He waved at me enthusiastically. His mother waved too, a quiet sign that the tension truly was gone. The moment felt simple, and somehow powerful. Looking back, I realized the jungle itself had mirrored the day. Loud and chaotic at first, then still and peaceful once the storm passed. Sometimes truth doesn't shout, it waits patiently for everyone else to quiet down. And that became the real lesson of the story. Fear can start the noise, but honesty brings the silence where understanding finally grows.
Some stories end with confrontation. This one ended with connection, and remember that even in the wildest moment, truth has way of standing taller than fire. If you enjoyed don't forget to subscribe to Karen Universe, share with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments.